2nd of January 2024. I am Councillor Phil Rogers and I will be chairing this meeting. Please could you ensure that your phones are switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. In addition, when asked to raise your hand, if members who are virtually viewing this meeting could raise your electronic hand, and for members who are in the chamber, just raise your hand. For the purpose of declarations, I would like to confirm that we will be scrutinising items 7, 8 and 11 of the Cabinet papers today. Moving along to agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest, please? Okay, I can't see any. Thank you very much. We'll move along. Agenda item 3, the minutes of the previous meeting. The minutes are attached at pages 5 to 10 of the agenda pack. If you feel these are an accurate record of the meeting, I am happy to propose them. Has anybody got any questions they'd like to have on the minutes of the meeting, please? No indications. Okay, I am happy to propose it. Could I have a seconder, please?
I second, Chair.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Agenda item 4, pre-decision scrutiny. We're going to move to the Cabinet Board agenda. And as we've said, we're doing 7, 8 and 11 this morning. Agenda item 7, self-assessment for 2022 to 2023, which are on pages 19 to 68 of the papers. Officers, would you like add anything additional to the report?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to add some context for the committee. So this is our second self-assessment that we've completed, which is a requirement under the Local Government and Elections Wales Act 2021. So the self-assessment requires us to consider the extent to which we as a council are exercising our functions effectively, how we're using our resources efficiently, economically and effectively, and how we ensure that we've got the right governance arrangements in place to make sure those things happen. The self-assessment states what arrangements we have in place to ensure that we do those things I've just run through. And we've also considered how effective those arrangements are and how they can be further improved. So the conclusion of our second self-assessment is set out on the self-assessment overview, which is on pages 18 to 19 on the document. And Neath Talbot Council is identified as mature when assessed against the Local Government Association Efficiency Toolkit. Now, that toolkit is a methodology we use for our first assessment as well. We've maintained the same toolkit to enable us to demonstrate progress over time. Whilst the rating remains the same as 21-22, it is felt that significant progress has been made, but it will take some time for all the core activity areas to be at a stage where we can progress into an overall rating of leading. As required under the Local Government Elections Wales Act, on the 13th of November, the Governance and Audit Committee reviewed the draft self-assessment and the committee made no recommendations for any changes to the conclusions or actions contained within the draft. Work is ongoing to develop an assessment process around political leadership, which is currently not included in our assessment process, and that will be included in our 23-24 self-assessment. Just to conclude, Chair, it is still very much a learning curve for us as officers and how we undertake the self-assessment, because guidance from Welsh Government was very limited. So we have got 22 local authorities across Wales who are undertaking the self-assessment in different ways. What we are also mindful of is for the self-assessment process to add value. We already undertake a number of other assessments during the year, very similar to this assessment process. So we do an annual assessment of our performance when we do our corporate plan annual report, and we also undertake an assessment of our governance arrangements when we complete the annual governance statement, which is appended to the statement of accounts. So when we're going to be completing our 23-24 self-assessment, we are going to be looking at whether or not the self-assessment remains as a standalone document, or indeed it makes much more sense to dovetail it into other reporting processes. Thank you, Chair.
Many thanks, Karen. We'll move now, please, to members' questions. We'll start off first, please, with Councillor Rob Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Corinne, for the summary. I've got quite a few points and questions in relation, particularly around the summary of performance. If I look at page 29, or in the document itself, page 7, I note the summary there has 51 areas that have either target dates or its dates ongoing. Yet I'm disappointed to find that of those completed, only 37.25% or 19 of those areas have actually got a completed tag to them. I know with reports, and this one is a 22-23, we always analyse the performance, but this is a self-assessment performance. So reality is we've either missed targets or got ongoing for 62.75. So in other words, only a third have been completed. And looking at the analysis of those that are outstanding or ongoing or failed to complete, leadership of staff, procurement, data, internal communication, and two in particular jumped out at me as not being completed is SA22, refine the council's approach to the self-assessment strategy that had a completion date of September 23 that hasn't been completed, and SA3 to set up a recruitment task force, I believe with a similar date. I just don't understand why there would be a delay in setting up a recruitment task force in relation to those items. And then moving to the further part of the summary performance, commencement on page 38 or 16 of the document. Several points here. My main gripe on this particular section, for the past 13 years, we have always asked that percentage figures are meaningless unless you have the figures that they relate to. We have always said, 100% increase on one is 2. And several of the items here do not include those figures. So I'll just give you an example. The one that talks about children. The percentage figure there is meaningless. Then we talk about homelessness of the intervention, but we haven't got the figures. The figures in relation to A and B roads, we've got percentage figures, and as a matter of fact, the percentage sign is missing from the percentage figures that have been provided. DFGs, why is it taking nearly a year to deliver DFGs? And then it goes on, the leavers within the local authority, people that are leaving the authority. Whilst I acknowledge that it says about track and trace, many of the people of track and trace then move to our enforcement teams and still remain. I would be more concerned with what other people have been leaving the authority and for the reasons why. And then finally, it's got planning application that they're compliant within the 80 days. But I was led to believe that to determine a planning application is 8 weeks extended to 16 weeks with mutual consent. So that would make 56 days under the Planning Act, if my memory serves me right. Where this leaves me, and I'll finish on this point, is page 21 of the report, the decision making. And it asks there to make a decision that we accept the report. How does this report provide us with a functioning, an effective authority who's using its resources economically, efficiently, and effectively, and its governance is effective to deliver the other two? Well, how can that be when we're not completing 2/3 of the targets we've set ourselves? Members can't assess against percentage without the figures. There's a lot of gaps in the report that those that are aware will know that we have banged on about figures against percentages for years and years and years. And I'm extremely disappointed to find yet again a report reflecting how good this council is has got holes in it because it can't be effectively scrutinised. So as you can see, Chair, there's quite a bit that I'm disappointed with, and how can we recommend to the Cabinet Board to make the decision here when we can't compare whether we are an effective, economic and efficient council based on the evidence that's been presented to us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. If I could bring Karen back in now then, please.
Thank you, Chair. If I take some of the points Councillor Jones has raised. With reference to SA 22, Councillor Jones refining the Council's approach to the annual self-assessment. Capacity, unfortunately, is the reason why we haven't been able to do that for the 22-23. But as I said, Councillor Jones, my introductory remarks that we're looking to do that for the 22-23 and for the 23-24 self-assessment. I apologise for the lack of numbers in the report associated with the percentages, and we look to make sure that they are included before we go for publication.
Thank you, Karen. Would you like to come back in, Councillor Jones?
Yeah, I think, again, this isn't finger pointing, it's just the general malaise within the report. You know, Karen, you talk about capacity, that highlights the point that I made in relation to levers. You know, it specifically says about track and trace there, but we've got no areas of identification. We know that several people have left planning, and we know planning's under pressure, but then it doesn't make sense that we haven't set up the internal task force to look at a multi-agency approach in relation to what we can do to recruit people within the organisation. It's as an ongoing in the report. And I think one thing here is reacting against the other because we haven't completed these areas. And I hope I'm making myself clear here that we need to get better at this. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Can I bring Sheena Rees in, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Jones, the point in relation to the recruitment task force as ongoing is actually meant to denote that the task force has been set up, it is established, but it's ongoing because it continues to meet. So as you say, there are a number of hard to fill jobs across the council. So the work of the recruitment task force isn't complete yet. So that's why we've put it as ongoing. But the recruitment task force has been set up, just to reassure you. We are looking at the data in relation to leavers. We've improved the categories in relation to leaver reasons. So we're working quite hard at bringing forward more detailed data in relation to our leavers. The data before you reflects the year 22-23. So as time goes on, we'll be able to provide you with more detailed information in relation to that.
Many thanks, Sheena. We look forward to hearing from that. Are you okay with that, Councillor Jones? I got a feeling that this year, hopefully, they've taken your points on board and this year's report will be better. Yeah. Yeah,
you know, again, it highlights, I totally accept what Sheena is saying, but that's not what's reflected within the report. The report says that it's ongoing. I think it would have been far clearer for us to have had a report there which said a task force has been set up. What it actually says is the task force is bringing together key internal stakeholders and partners agency approach in November 23, but a number of actions were undertaken to fill the vacancies. If that has started off by saying a task force needs to be driven and set up September 23, well, say the task force was set up and now continues ongoing work. It would have made the report a lot easier to read then, put it that way.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. I think looking around it, the points have been duly noted. Thank you very much. Next up, please, Councillor Sonia Reynolds, please.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's quite a simple point. I think Corinne started to answer it when she gave her preamble. It's on page 20 where you talk about the approach that will be adopted, was adopted this year for the report and where we're looking for the further years. I just wondered, and I'm assuming it's because you wanted comparability, so you were using the toolkit that you didn't use, that you didn't align it with the with other reports and other structures as other authorities have done.
Do you want to come in a second? Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Come in a second, please, Karen.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Renner is absolutely right. We were keen to adopt a methodology at the outset. We took some time actually to do some research to establish what would be the best approach for the self-assessment, because as I said, guidance was quite limited for how local authorities could undertake the assessment. So yes, hopefully it's only our second one we've completed. Lots to take on board today for our third one, for the feedback from members. And then we'll have a third year then, and hopefully that toolkit will be able to demonstrate the progress we're making over time. But as I said, and you said yourself, Councillor Reynolds, we will look to whether or not it makes sense to dovetail it into some of our other reporting processes, making sure we're not duplicating, but we're adding value.
Thanks, Karen. Are you happy, Councillor Reynolds? Thank you very much. Thank you. Are there any other questions on the self-assessment item 7, please? I can't see any other indication, so we'll move along. Agenda item 8 is... Oh, sorry, I'm going to come back. The recommendations are listed on page 21 of the Cabinet agenda. I'm happy to propose it. Can I have a seconder, please? Don't all rush at once.
Happy second, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Henton. Thank you. Can members please indicate if they wish to abstain?
I can see no abstentions, Chair.
Thank you, Alison. Members, if you do not indicate to the contrary, then I will take it that this decision is supported to Cabinet.
I can see no indications to the contrary, Chair. The recommendations are supported to Cabinet.
Thank you, Alison. Moving along, agenda item 8, update report on the settlement position. Officers, would you like to add anything additional to the report? Hugh?
Yeah, just very briefly, Chair, thank you. So this is an information report for the Cabinet, just setting out the worsening financial position as a result of the provisional settlement, where we received a 2.8% increase, not 3.1%. Also setting out some detail around 3 specific grants where we know from the settlement there's been significant cuts across Wales, so we're waiting to see exactly the implications for ourselves. And there's some narrative in the report around what that means specifically in terms of those 3 grants. So happy to take any questions, Chair, or specifically in relation to the grants. There's colleagues from Education and Social Services on the call as well. So thank you.
Many thanks, Hugh. We'll move now to members' questions. First up, indication from Councillor Sean Percy, please.
Diolch, Cadeirydd, thank you. Yeah, my question is around the specific grants element of this report. I'm grateful for a little bit more information on the implications of this. I think under Children, Communities and Communities for Work, there's a little bit of narrative around what the impact might be. But with the social care workforce grant, for example, it sets out sort of how it's normally spent, but not how this £500,000 is going to impact the budget. And it'd be just helpful to clarify where these sit against the previous sort of reports and discussions we've had. So are these the 3 grants here, the detail of those 3 grants, has that come in since our last scrutiny discussion, or was that known about when we spoke last? So just trying to understand if it's an additional pressure or one that we were aware of previously. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Percy. Come back, bring Hugh back in, please.
Yeah, just in terms of when we knew, so these came through as a result of the provisional settlement. So on the 20th of December, before Christmas, we were advised of these specific grant reductions, which is why obviously we're bringing it to Cabinet today for information. Probably best if I hand over to Andrew Jarrett in relation to the social care workforce grant, that he can give, oh, he's got his hand up already, he can give some context around that £500,000. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Hugh. Can I bring Andrew in then, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor, for the question. I think it's a good point. The social care workforce grant, so whenever any grant is cut, then we look to whether actually there is an opportunity to cut what we spend that grant on. That's obviously the first thing we do. And I think what we're setting out here is the fact that Welsh Government encourages us at the time very strongly to use this grant to provide support to external domiciliary care providers so that they could recruit more domiciliary care provision to get people out of hospital. We did that, and what we're showing there is actually we can't take that money back off them at this stage. That would just not make sense whatsoever. So that is now another £500,000 pressure on the social services budget, which we're still working through how we're gonna bring that to balance.
Many thanks, Andrew. Very clear. Councillor Percy, would you like to come back in?
Yeah, yes, only briefly, Chair. Diolch. Thanks both for the clarity there. Yeah, I think you've made the distinction, Andrew, between the other two, where it sort of says, okay, we can stop doing some of this grant-related activity, and I think that was my concern with this particular one, is another £500,000 sort of gap in the budget is an enormous ask, isn't it? Over and above the previous reports we've had, and over and above the overall RSG figure that's slightly reduced as well. So as you said, so you're saying you're working through that at the moment, just as part of the budget setting process, to try and, are you going to try and find that within your budgets, or is this being spread across directorates to try and make that make up that gap?
No,
Thank you,
we've
Councillor
taken.
Percy. Bring Andrew back in. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Sorry. Yeah, we've undertaken to take that out of social services budget. So we're just finalising now how we might do some of that, Councillor Percy.
Many
Okay,
thanks.
great.
Are you happy, Councillor Percy?
Yeah.
Yes. Diolch. Thank you. Are there any other questions on this item, please? I can't see any indications. This report is for information only. At this point, we'll move back to the Cabinet Scrutiny agenda. Agenda item 5 is the Forward Work Programme, which is on page 11 and 12. This item is just for noting, unless members have any comments. No comments, thank you. Agenda item 6, Committee Action Log. Again, this item is just for noting, unless members have comments on this item. Can't see any indications. Moving along. Agenda item 7, this is urgent items. I hope you've all received the one urgent item today about APSE Wales Chair, Housing, Homelessness and Community Support. The committee have chosen not to scrutinise this item. Okay, just making people aware. Yep. Okay, agenda item 8, access to meetings. To resolve to exclude the public for the following items pursuant to section 100A, 4 and 5 of the Local Government Act 1972 and the relevant exempt paragraphs of Part 4 of Schedule 12A to the above Act. I'm happy to propose. Can I please have a seconder?
Happy to second, Chair.
Many thanks, Councillor Henton. Should we stop the recording?
Yeah, can we just stop the